that means one of two things. Either inflation isn't real, and or it just means that consumers can handle it. Like when you pass the price changes on, that they continue to buy, they continue to trade what they buy for different things, right? It means like the kind of aggregate data, the way that we expected it in our grandparents' economy, the one that my grandmother talked about before, is super different than the one that we would have had.
Hello and welcome to Market Outsiders. It's Thursday, October 16th. We've been gone for a little while, but we're back today talking about a company that you are very familiar with. You might have even walked into one today. Yes, we are talking about Walmart. Before we get there, if you have not rated, reviewed, and subscribed to Market Outsiders, please take 30 seconds to do that. It really, really helps us out. While you're doing that, Jenny Rae, good morning. And would you like to tee up today's conversation for us?
Good morning, Namaan. I'm going to talk about Walmart first, and then I want to share actually a little snippet from the reason that we were off earlier this week. So first of all, with Walmart, I noticed that there were two things that really changed my personal perception of Walmart. I used to be in the kind of like, I don't shop at Walmart category. But first of all, I noticed that friends of mine that went to Bain started working at Walmart. And so Walmart has a really impressive internal strategy group, planning group. And it was not a tier down. It was actually a tier up in terms of active management from Bain. And that was kind of one of my first eye openers in my career to understand Walmart as an operator and as a company. And, in the age, I grew up in the era of Kmart and Walmart. And so to watch Walmart become what it has come today in an era where Kmart simultaneously went completely bankrupt, in a really interesting financial and business journey for me. And I think it's interesting for us to think through businesses that either are at that same place where predecessors or competitors have died, or where they've completely reimagined them. I think about Best Buy. We also have Circuit City in the US. I was in Michael's yesterday. So Joanne Fabrics just went out of business. I think that it's really interesting to study businesses in sectors where you've seen big bankruptcies and where a business has survived, to understand what their different what businesses are and why. And so that's kind of point number one. Point number two is when you said at the beginning, have you been in a Walmart recently? Just so that everybody knows, I shop a lot at Walmart. They have the largest portion of my grocery spend every year. And I go into Walmart 1 to 2 times a year. In fact, my son last night after soccer practice was like, Mom, we need to go to Walmart. It's Dad's birthday. We need to go get a present. I was like, son, that's not how we use Walmart. Like you know, get the stuff from Walmart and they bring it to us. This is our way of utilizing Walmart. So Walmart has done a really fantastic job of expanding its customer base. We're not going to talk about any of that today, but I thought it was kind of fun to talk about. But Naman, I guess how I am. The last thing that I just wanted to share is that my grandmother passed away just over a week ago, and I went to what was effectively a family reunion and her memorial service this weekend. And I was the oldest granddaughter on that side of the family, so I shared at the memorial service. And on my reflections about my grandma, I remembered an investing conversation that we had maybe 5 years ago. And that investing conversation was really interesting. First of all, if you guys have elders in your family that you haven't talked to about money or investing, whether you think that they're good or bad at managing their money and investments, I promise you they will have a different perspective from you, and it is a really worthwhile conversation to have. But I sat her down, and I actually turned on my voice note, so I have the voice note of this conversation. And I asked her if she would give me financial advice from her years of investing. And at this point, my grandfather had already passed away, so she was kind of, managing her own money and process. And she gave me a zinger that I thought was really interesting. I was like, "Are you Warren Buffett?" She said, "Buy stuff that you never plan to sell." So I was reflecting on her this weekend, her life and her legacy. She was faithful to our family. She was faithful to her community, but she was also really kind of a market outsider investor. She bought land, she bought, businesses directly, and then she also bought stocks, mostly stocks. But her thesis was, buy the ones that you want to hold forever. Don't think about the valuation, but really focus on what you think will make the most sense in the long run. She only said that she had sold one stock ever in her lifetime, and at the end of the episode, I'll tell y'all what that stock was. So thanks for asking. It's been a little bit of a tender but beautiful week for us. But I've been thinking about, like, what am I glad that I did with her, and beyond the visits, which were treasured, and the letters that I kept from her, and her recipes. She was an avid cook. I have, recipes that she wrote out. The thing that for me is the biggest treasure is, that advice that I carry on in the legacy. How about you? What was your weekend like?
Well, first of all, I'll just say that's a special legacy. To be
Yeah.
able to look back on conversations and wisdom like that, I don't think that everybody can say that they had that. So I think that's something to be treasured. And thank you for sharing it with us. My week was a little bit less eventful, and I think a little bit less emotional. So we're just, you know, I think we've been focused on things that would seem more surface level than what you've been thinking about and dealing with. But I'm glad that you get a chance to be with your family, and I'm glad that we get a chance to be back today and have this conversation.
One thing, just on that, Iman, that I thought was really interesting. I think death is such a valuable part, and reflections on death are such a valuable part of living. But when I reflect on what people talked about my grandmother, there were, as I can remember in the entire weekend, 0 what I would call notable moments. It was all, like, the daily stuff, right? They talked about her exceptional cooking, about the way that she, things in the place that she created inside her home. It wasn't like a trip that she took us on, or a family reunion, or which those things all were also true. It was the daily memories, actually, that everybody was reflecting on, that were like the makeup of the nostalgia of the time together. So what you did this weekend will probably be exactly what your kids will talk about, when they're remembering your life, right? The football that you like to watch, and the cooking that your wife did, and the walks that you went on in your neighborhood, and why you lived in the cities that you lived in, right? I think, like, those things, that's part of the reflection that was super cool to me. So
Yeah,
so maybe
it's the
what
ordinary that ends up being
it
special.
is. It is, absolutely. So saying that, did you go to Walmart this weekend?
I have not probably go to Walmart, I don't know, once a year, if that.
All right. I'm
Walmart
gonna
is
make
not
it
a
my
part of.
mission. I'm gonna make it my mission to help you understand the magic of the Walmart
You
situation.
should. Hey, look, as our stable of kids grows, I might find myself going back to Walmart like more and more, but I am not a regular customer of Walmart. They do not have like even 1% share of my wallet. So it's like
Challenge accepted.
challenge accepted. There you go. So I've never had Walmart Plus, and so I would think that I'm probably the type of customer that Walmart would want to acquire, but they have not been successful so far.
Okay, awesome. Well,
So
we can talk about that. We're gonna have a one-on-one with the CEO this morning, where we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the, announcements that were recently made. So let me bring up the article. This really sparked my interest. Anytime I find something kind of in the news that I'm like, wow, that is not what I would have expected. I want to understand why, right? And in an era where we have business and politics quite mixed together, I think it's really important to be able to tease out what is political positioning and what is business positioning, and where the two of them meet and why. And so this was the message, right? Top Walmart exec says American manufacturing comeback is real and good for business. There was a forum this week, called the Invest in America Forum, run by CNBC. And so this was kind of the headline, right? Walmart US CEO John Furner said the company is increasing its investments in US made products and suppliers as a strategic priority. So one of my first questions, Naman, was, like, is that increasing it from 1 to 2%? Right? Like you said, like, if I take your share of wallet from 1 to 2%, Walmart still doesn't matter. But it's great for politics. So if you're able to say, like, I'm making investments in America, here are my investments, then then that would kind of be a very interesting political moment. So one of the things that I did to read this entire article was start with that thesis, right? Which is that I suspect that their investments in US made products are a tiny part of their wallet right now. Namaan, what about you? US products, US suppliers. And if you want to like case interview breakdown on me, do it. But like, what do you think some of their key categories are and where would you suspect their supply comes from?
Yeah. Well, if I had to think about their key categories, I think grocery would be number one. Then I'd move number two to what we'd call like maybe household durable goods. Then I think about clothing, number three, and then I'd probably lump everything else that Walmart sells into a number like four other bucket, right? That would include your toys, your electronics, your gardening tools, et cetera, et cetera. And when you first started talking, my initial hypothesis was that, man, like maybe only a third, but definitely less than half of their products would be kind of US based. I think the only thing that would kind of bump that number up is if you include grocery in the calculus, because I don't think it makes sense for like produce and some of the other like grocery items to be like heavily imported. Just from a cost perspective, right? Walmart's value proposition is we're cheap, and then U.S. consumers like the brands that they like, and so I think any if any category would skew that number up in terms of like, hey, how many of your products come from the U.S., it'd be grocery, but like I would think it's like maybe a third
Awesome. Okay, and so maybe a third in total, in aggregate, right?
in aggregate.
Okay, awesome. And then let me ask a second question. In a era where the second one says, right, businesses like Walmart are focused on keeping prices as low as possible for customers amid economic uncertainty, right? So they're not going to pass on price increases unless they absolutely have to. So the first thing they're going to do is not go to their customers and say, hey, pay more. The first thing they're going to do is go to their
Go to the
suppliers.
suppliers.
I need this for less. And Walmart's supplier power is famed across the industry. But if they're going to do that, why would they bring more like how does that work in tandem? Do you think my thesis is right that this is like a notable fringe thing, but not a core thing? Or is there some reason that I might be missing on the surface that they would say, hey, we are actually going to reduce costs by either using more suppliers in the US, by buying more from a mix of suppliers inside the US, by moving to suppliers in the US, right? Like to me, generally the thesis for that is that brings costs up. So why would you do that in an era where you're trying to keep your costs low? Can you just kind of give us a little bit of a loose?
Yeah, I mean, well, two ideas, and we can unpack, how far or close I am to the truth. I think number one is the more that you diversify your supplier mix, the more leverage you have with each one, because you have a substitute, you have an alternative, and I'm sure that that's a part of the calculus here at Walmart. Is let's make sure that we are not in one product category or for one SKU. Let's make sure that we are not overly reliant on one supplier, because then in that relationship, we don't have the power over that supplier that we would like to have in all of our relationships because of the volume that we procure. So I think that's reason number one. And reason number two is I think that tax credits and tariffs change the economics around American manufacturing. And so it's very possible that between state level tax incentives, between, calculating tariff impact into your like cost basis, that it actually turns out that manufacturing in the US might be at par in terms of cost with overseas manufacturing. And at that point, you've kind of eliminated the number one reason why you wouldn't manufacture in the US. And then you've also got additional reasons why it makes sense. Like from a branding perspective, from a political perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a supplier power perspective. Now you've got all these other reasons on top of like the cost issue where it makes sense to bring manufacturing back. And so I would think that that's the way that Walmart leadership is thinking about, kind of leaning into U.S. manufacturing. Do your projects ever drag? Budgets creep? Deadlines slip? Or worse, do you deliver something that meets the spec, but no one's happy with how it got done? If that sounds familiar, it's time for Management Consulted's project management training. Our program brings consulting level rigor. These are the same tools and approaches that top consulting firms use. in a format you can deploy across your team now. You'll learn how to build battle-tested project plans, anticipate and manage risk, align stakeholders early so surprises are minimized, track progress transparently, and hit those milestones without burning out resources. Each training includes tailored project templates, real case studies, and live feedback. No fluff, all impact. If you lead teams, work cross-functionally, or just want fewer late nights chasing deliverables, this is for you. Head to managementconsulted.com/project-management-training. That's managementconsulted.com/project-management-training to invest in a program that will save your team time, money, and heartache.
I haven't even done a full deep dive in this article. Last question just is on timing between ordering and stocking in stores. I remember one of my friends that worked at Home Depot. This is where you like start to connect the dots, right? While I was at Bain in Atlanta, he was at Home Depot in their purchasing department, and his job was to purchase all of their patio furniture. So like that was his category. It was patio furniture. And so it was usually somewhere around October, November of the prior year where he was buying patio furniture to roll out in stores in March. Right. So I was like super fascinated by the fact that they made financial and tactical commitments so long before a lot of the like in market decisions were there. And retailers like Home Depot are effectively like they're fashion designers, the same way that fashion designers are kind of like, it's going to be hot this spring. What I say is hot is going to be hot this spring. Like they're trying to kind of like test the wind and also shape the way that the wind is blowing. They're thinking about that. So what do you think the time differences are, and are they real? So could I buy an American product in, you know, in January, or am I buying American products also in October? Do I have any cash flow benefits from buying an American product in October because I'm paying them at a different time? Like, can you just walk me through a little bit about what you would think of, at least if you were looking
Yeah,
at
I think
logistics?
that's a really good point. I think it does give you more flexibility in terms of when you make your decision making, because you don't have to factor in like a 3 month like ocean barge transit time between China and Long Beach. And so, like, when you no longer have like really slow and potentially expensive overseas shipping to think about, well, now instead of ordering my patio furniture in October, I can probably afford to order my patio furniture in January. And so, what does that do? Well, number one, it improves my cash flow, like you said. Number two, it reduces my inventory holding costs. Number three, it allows me to get a better sense of where the trends are going and where customer demand is. Number four, it actually allows me to order less at a time. So I'm able to like better optimize my inventory to demand. I think there's a lot of benefits, especially if you are like the largest contract for a particular manufacturing operation. So then you hold not just power in terms of cost, you also hold power in terms of priority. So it's like I want this production run to happen at this time, and because I'm Walmart, you're going to listen to me and you're going to adhere to my timeline. And so you know who's going to get hurt? It's going to be like the smaller businesses that also contract with this factory. And so I think for all of those reasons are also valid reasons why I would think about kind of onshoring manufacturing if I hadn't thought about it before.
It's really interesting because I would suspect if you measured it that Walmart would have stronger supplier power than Amazon, but Amazon has a little bit of a different operating system.
Yeah.
One of Amazon's like North Star operating metrics is never pay a dollar for something until you've already received the dollar in the sale, right? Like they
And
they
that's the Costco
literally
model.
have effectively like zero inventory holding costs, right? Because the timeline that they've been able to achieve between somebody ordering something and then the stock that it's holding and the analytics that they have on all of those things, along with the fact that they require their customers to hold inventory basically on a consignment basis, and then they have a shortened time period between that inventory shipping to the Amazon facility and then the inventory shipping out from the Amazon time facility. They've basically been able to have near zero, right? Inventory holding costs. Walmart's definitely not there. It's part of their
Or
supply.
even they've actually one point on Amazon, they've actually turned that into a revenue center, not a cost center, because now your suppliers pay you to hold it for them. And like
Correct.
you're taking extra margin on that transaction. It's not just breaking even, it's actually generating revenue on something that traditionally has been a cost center. I think that was one of the huge innovations that Amazon brought to the market that I almost never hear about.
Nobody ever talks about it. They talk about what Amazon sells and how you can get the products and the fact that they own their own, logistics network, but like that like financial operating piece of it, Walmart's not there. But interestingly, it creates more supplier power for Walmart when they order in bulk, and then they hold the inventory. So Walmart is taking on more risk, but generating more power for against or on behalf of their collective suppliers at the same time. I agree with you on everything except for one thing that you said, which is I don't know the answer to this, but this is the kind of thing that I think would be really interesting in exploring, which is that I don't know that it enables them to change when they order, because I think if you have a mix inside a category, you're going to order it all at the same time. So like I think that all that helps with that is if you move an entire category inside the US. And maybe that's what they're talking about doing. So I don't know, if I were looking at a metric for Walmart, one of the things I would look at, this is very nuanced, but exactly the type of thing that makes a difference when you're looking at a business like this. It wouldn't be US versus international mix. It would be by category, US versus
And
international mix.
probably by subcategory. Like it wouldn't be all outdoor furniture. It would just be like, are we moving like our patio set like relationships to the US, right? And then we
Exactly.
can order all of our patio sets in January, but then
Our
maybe
grills, our bikes, our, right,
right,
like,
but
yeah,
maybe our like umbrellas are still coming from China, right? And
correct.
so yeah, I think it would actually be on like a subcategory basis.
So let's dive into some of the insights here because if like you were kind of like, really, like, is this a token? Is we all know what the political environment is right now. Is this the kind of thing that you say because that's the right thing to say, or is it actually good for business? I'd love to kind of see that. So they kind of talked about this, right? Investing in U.S. manufacturing and U.S. operations. It's great for business, but it's also great for employment. Okay, now this was an line that I thought, okay, I think that's bull, right? Like, like you have to assume that you are looking for employees that would want to work elsewhere. Walmart is generally not one of those stores, right? And you're also in an era where we're thinking about AI, where you're trying to you're trying to actually like shed employees, right? So like it's great for employment. What does that even mean? Like, does that mean that we're able to like have more Americans on the docket? I don't know. To me, I was kind of like,
One of
nobody
the
is saying that right now. It doesn't make sense.
So just some like additional insight here. Like we actually don't even have enough workers in America today to fulfill the current manufacturing demand. And so like there is a real labor shortage in the manufacturing sector in the US, and that's a problem that needs to be fixed, and that's like probably going to take a public private partnership to fix. But like manufacturing facilities in the US are more advanced than almost anywhere else in the world. And so when people think manufacturing, they think factories of 60 years ago, right? And like people on an assembly line. Like the manufacturing plants of today are almost entirely automated. And so like are you creating new jobs? Yes. Are you creating new jobs at the scale that people think you're creating them? No. Like these are mostly like robotics enabled manufacturing plants. They are not like human enabled. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you think about the sector.
And it's not, but when he was saying this, I'm like, but he's speaking from Walmart's perspective. When he's saying it's great for employment, what does he mean? Does that mean, is he talking from a sector basis, like you're saying? Is he saying like it's great for employing workers in factories? Now, Naman, to that
I think
point,
he's saying
there
it's
are
great
still
for the
people.
country.
I think so too, right? Because I couldn't think of a way that he would be saying that this is good for Walmart, for Walmart's employment. I think he's just basically saying like in general, if we are producing things, then we are, maybe if it doesn't mean that we hire 50 more manufacturing people in one of these stores, we still do have a logistics person that we can't outsource. We still do have if you're pushing more through that flow, like some of that just can't be handled by AI. You have more trucks that are driving the stuff. You're buying from more suppliers so that there's entire trickle down effects in terms of entire ecosystem that you're supporting. There are salespeople that you're supporting, right? So there like are people that are certainly impacted by employment, but I couldn't think of a way that it was a Walmart employment. But look at this. This was a zinger. 2/3 of the products that Walmart sells are made, grown, or assembled in the United States right now. That astounded me. I would have underbet you if you said it was a third. I would have said, "Come on, let's bet $1." And I would have said, like, it can't be more than like a quarter. And I would have gone category by category on a few of the things. But accounting for grocery, I would have said would have been like a large part of it.
Hmm.
And then almost all of the rest of the store I would have assumed was not from the United States. So yeah, a
That's
new
great.
beef processing facility that's Walmart specific, in Kansas that is expected to create over 600 jobs. That is, interestingly, like food and farming is harder to remove jobs from in an era of AI or robotics than something else would be. They also talked about, right, and that's by the way, Walmart having its own beef processing facility. I would have never guessed that Walmart had that.
It wouldn't shock me if they're the largest seller of beef in the country.
I would absolutely agree, but that kind of vertical integration, I wouldn't have suspected. What about you?
Well, that was actually one of my questions at the top I didn't mention is how much of this manufacturing are you bringing back to the US and how much are you like actually insourcing, meaning vertically integrating and like getting into the manufacturing game yourself. And so I think for some products, it doesn't make sense to vertically integrate, but it's interesting that beef is where they're kind of choosing to make this kind of investment. I'm honestly not exactly sure why. There just might be a lot of competition for production capacity, and it might just make sense to go ahead
That's
and
a really
to own
interesting
it.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know beef prices have skyrocketed in the U.S. lately, and so maybe like there's some more cost control that owning the processing facility gives them. Like if you're not able to like cut costs on like the per pound or the per cow basis, then you've got to look at processing further downstream,
So
and maybe
you're
that's where
buying it
they're
on the
turning.
commodity market at whatever
Yeah,
price somebody sells it to you
yeah.
for, or you're kind of managing your own supply. Like in the way that I have my 9 cattle on my
Hmm.
farm. Yep. Yeah, what people pay for beef is different than what I pay for beef because I own
Yes.
my own. Yeah, absolutely. This is another interesting one. Did you mention pharma before?
No.
Walmart Pharmacy is kind of one of those, like, by a footprint standpoint, a pretty small piece of what they do, but it's actually a quite substantial and very profitable part of their business.
Hmm.
And so, you're right, they're aimed at bringing products like amoxicillin back to the United States. That to me seems like a category that makes a huge amount of sense.
Totally. And pharmacy is strategically important because it brings people back into the stores. It's a driver of repeat visits.
Correct, absolutely. And so, that anyhow, I that was a light bulb for me where I thought, okay, that category would have made sense.
Hmm.
Global sourcing remains essential for Walmart's operations, right? Coffee is an example. Yeah, there
Yeah.
isn't like probably a US place where we could grow enough
We don't
coffee.
have the climate for it.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
and like building an entirely new supply system in Hawaii, for example, where coffee could potentially be grown, where other things are already currently
Yeah.
grown, is not necessarily the highest and best use of that. And it wouldn't serve Walmart's low cost vision,
No.
in tandem with other things. What about this next piece, right? Trade policy uncertainty. Like, if you're Walmart, do you care about that right now? Are you onshoring because you feel like tariffs are the big number one issue?
Personally, no. Like that's a part of the calculus, but I think this whole uncertainty messaging is overblown. I like Walmart made decisions like it's October 16th today. They made a decision for what's happening on October 16th 6 months ago. And 6 months ago, we hadn't even had Liberation Day yet. And so like businesses are going through like their planning process the same way that they've always gone through it. They're making decisions the best way they know how with the information they have at their fingertips. Now we have new information, like there's a tariff regime. Okay, great. We'll take that into account. Um, it might not be the policy that they prefer, but you just use that as one of your inputs now and you make a decision to the best of your ability. I think, look, tariffs are moving through the courts. The Supreme Court's going to decide on the constitutionality of them. Like, who knows if they'll be around next month or 2 months from now? Like, regardless of what you think about them, we just don't know if they're going to stay. And you also don't know who's going to win the election in 2028. Like, it's very possible you have a completely new administration in power that on day one just removes the tariffs. And so, like, you don't make business decisions, especially when it comes to like bringing manufacturing back to America. Like, you don't make decisions like that based on a policy that might disappear in 18 months. Like, you have to have other business reasons for doing this. And we've mentioned a lot of them in this episode. And obviously, Walmart's done the math and found that those are financially compelling enough reasons to where they make sense in a tariff regime. And they also make sense if the tariffs were to disappear tomorrow.
I think you're exactly right. And I think that it comes back to, I think my hypothesis was right and wrong at the beginning, because I think that the thesis of this is probably a small token move is true, right? They are increasing on 2/3 of their kind of product base that are here, but they're not increasing to 99%, right? So it's 66% to 68% is the kind of increase. It's a small percentage increase, but directionally, I was wrong. I would have assumed that that when they were talking about the token, it was actually like a token area eclipsed by growth in other areas. And I do think that I've been, through this conversation, enlightened as to some of the reasons why long-term investment in um, American manufacturing, American supply chain, American vertical integration would make sense for a business like Walmart as they're thinking about cost management over a long period of time, recognizing that one of those costs absolutely is and could be tariffs, but that's not the.
It's not the only reason. And look, I'll just give you my like very, very simple investing thesis, which is this: never underestimate like the power of American companies to expand margins. Like, I think like you look at like headwinds that like or perceived headwinds that companies have faced over the last 10 or 15 years, and like consistently quarter over quarter, year over year, like you look at the S&P 500 and you're like, oh, margin expansion, margin expansion, margin expansion. Like, our management teams have gotten better, our businesses have gotten better. Like, if you look at American exports, like our number one export is like we build like big companies, and we build great companies, and we know how, like, in any environment, how to grow margin. And like Walmart, I think, is exhibit A of that. And so I certainly don't bet against American companies.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't talking about is that tariffs are kind of an asterisk on a rising cost environment, right? Labor costs are
I mean,
rising.
inflation's barely
And
budged, right? Like, so like all the doom and gloom you heard 6 months ago, look, it's not showing up in the data.
yeah, exactly. And so, that means one of two things. Either inflation isn't real, and or it just means that consumers can handle it. Like when you pass the price changes on, that they continue to buy, they continue to trade what they buy for different things, right? It means like the kind of aggregate data, the way that we expected it in our grandparents' economy, the one that my grandmother talked about before, is super different than the one that we would have had. So some things have stayed absolutely the same. The great companies that she bought and held for her entire life are still the great companies of today. And she didn't worry about the fact, like you said, Naman, that like she was like, oh, I don't know, like Procter and Gamble might not be here. Procter and Gamble might not be able to expand margins. Like she bet on the fact that they would continue to innovate, continue to sell, continue to find a new type of dryer sheet that they would sell to the next generation of consumers, and they would kind of continue to figure it out. And like her thesis was not like find obscure, tiny, like early stage startup companies. It was just like buy the greats and hold them forever. You want to know what the only company is she ever
What I was
sold?
gonna say is like, was it Procter and Gamble?
No. We actually talked about P&G specifically because that was kind of one of her theses. No, I'll share. This was kind of like an asterisk on her thesis, but I also kind of laughed about this because, of course, I went to Columbia Business School. She said that one of the reasons, like when she was doing diligence on a company, that she would often buy them is if they had a CEO who had not gone to an Ivy League school. And she was kind of just telling me, like, don't get too big for your britches because a lot of Ivy League managers are not the ones that I would invest in, like my grandmother's, armchair investing. Um, I just thought that
I
was
love
like
that.
a super fascinating asterisk. But she would kind of say, like, if I find somebody from like a, third tier business school who's been at the company for 25 years, like those are the people that I generally am gonna like lean into from an investing perspective. I thought that was pretty fascinating. But you want to know the company?
Who is it?
Were you going to say something mean about me? Because nobody wants to miss out on that before I say the name of the company.
No, no, I'm sitting at the edge of my seat here.
Okay, Bank of America was the only company that she ever sold.
Can't blame her.
So, yeah, out of her entire stock portfolio, which was like which was pretty broad. It wasn't just a couple of stocks. She held every single one of the kind of American greats. Over time, she bought into the tech companies in the 2000s. But yeah, it was pretty wild that overall, Bank of America was the only one that she ever sold. So, it was she was a wild woman. She was super quiet, but she taught us a lot and was great heritage to have. Thanks for letting me share that, Naman.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting us into what's been happening this week. Well, I hope that you all enjoyed this episode of Market Outsiders. If you're a Walmart customer, let us know in the comments how you shop at Walmart, how you would think about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. How kind of what's been happening in the macro economy is affecting you and the way that you shop and the way that you spend your money. We'd love to hear from you, and we will see you later this week for another episode of Market Outsiders. Thanks so much for joining us today.